All right, so I just hit record. Welcome everybody. This is Heather Riggs with the New England Museum Association. I just want to welcome everybody today, the first day of July. Yay, and happy birthday to Scarlett. She's not here today, so so we wish her a far distance happy birthday on that one. Today's session is being recorded just in case you do have to pop off a little bit early or want to share the information a little bit later on with your colleagues. That is greatly appreciated if you want to do that. As Cathy did say, the chat feature is there, so you have the option to actually use the chat feature to talk to each other and talk about ideas, or you can actually unmute yourself. We do like hearing your voices since we can't see you in person. It's always lovely to hear everybody's voice as well. So today's town hall will be on volunteers. I know we have a lot of them out there that are probably really missing seeing everybody coming into the museum, coming into the historic houses, giving tours, seeing general public. So we want to figure out how we want to continue to engage them in our new normal. So I want to introduce Cathy Saunders and Brittany Taylor will be leading this town hall. So make sure that you guys do participate. The town halls are something that we do want more participation in. So we do want to learn and listen from everybody here. So Cathy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, I just noticed that someone I used to work with at Science Museum of Minnesota is on this call. This is so exciting. Great, thank you so much. We're just so delighted to be here. I am a NEMA board member, and I actually work part-time both at Lippitt House Museum and at New Bedford Whaling Museum, but I coordinate the volunteers at Lippitt House Museum. And Brittany, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone, I'm Brittany. So I work at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, where I get to work with Cathy. And so there I am the volunteer and school programs manager at the museum.
You cut out, Brittany.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't have the best Wi-Fi.
So our plan is we have a little bit of, talk a little bit about our two programs, and in that kind of address some of the questions that we thought people might have and some of the questions that have come up, sort of how we've thought about them at our institutions. But actually, before we do that, I realized, Heather, would you launch, we have a quick little survey because there are people still joining, just to get a sense of, thank you for introducing yourself on the side, but also sort of the size and who you serve. So Heather's going to launch a poll.
Meg, can you try to see if you can access the poll? It's not letting me in.
But we'll do a little introduction, and then really the bulk of the time we're going to have turn over to y'all to share ideas and talk. We have some guiding questions, as any good museum educator might. But if here you can just tick off, let us know what the size of your volunteer corps is, and what the primary demographic age ranges of your volunteer corps are.
So Meg, there's also a second one that's going to come up, but you'll have to pop up. I'm not sure why I'm not able to have access to it.
Zoom is very arbitrary about who can get at the polls, because I couldn't, like, the last 3 times we had polls.
I know, so. And I'm like, I'm the host though.
That's nice. Looks like we got folks from all over New England here. That's great. Well, Brittany, do you want to start off by talking about the volunteer program at the Whaling Museum?
Oh, definitely. If at any point, if I'm really glitchy, not coming in, want to just write in the comments or let me know. Hopefully it works. Yeah, so right now with the volunteer group at the museum, we have around 120 volunteers, and of those, around 80 of them were actively working on the floor as docents, whether it's with school programs, highlight tours, or adult programming, or events. Obviously, that won't be for a while, those kind of roles. So our current return plan for the volunteers was first to have a survey, which we sent out about a month ago, which was to see what their comfort levels are, seeing, what safety procedures, if they were in place, would they be happy about, not happy about, and everything like that, just to get their take into our decision making. And then once we did that, we got great amount of feedback. Some of them were like, oh, we're ready to come back so I can get the doors open already. Whereas some of them were like, no, with my health conditions or with the general, environment, everything now, just don't feel safe coming in. So we try to be as open to all those suggestions that they had. And one thing we came up with temporarily, because for the Whaling Museum, we will be opening up in we'll be opening up in about a couple of weeks. And so we've opened up to volunteers. They can be on deck volunteers. And what those role is, it's not a docent role where they can give tours and have groups come around them where they can talk about an artifact. It's more of they'll be standing in as a safety advisor, as long as with fellow staff members throughout the museum. So instead of floating through the exhibit and giving tours, it's much more guiding people on the precautions they need to take. And it's something that we encourage the volunteers that none of them have to make up hours or we're asking them to do this. It's mainly for the few volunteers that are really eager to come back and want to be involved. But we really try to balance it with, whenever they are, the majority are ready to come back whenever they're ready. And then also we have digital content for the volunteers who are working at home as well, which is adding content to our museum website, which is activity sheets that they can create for families. And the other one is our YouTube channel, where the docents talk about their favorite artifact, and then they send us the video, and then we learning how to use iMovie or adding the photos in there and everything. That's actually one thing I hope at one point today we can discuss as well, is that kind of gap for the volunteers who aren't comfortable coming in and also not comfortable with technology. So I think that is the gap of a few volunteers that we are missing out with being able to connect with right now. That summarizes our general return plan. Cathy, I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, well, I'll just interject just to take a look at the poll, which I think is really interesting. It's fairly well balanced. We've got a little mix of size and of age, but the largest is small corps and the largest is the senior volunteers. So thank you. Good to hope you can see yourself and your peers here. So I represent the other end of the spectrum. With Lippitt House Museum, we're a small Victorian mansion on the east side of Providence. And our volunteer corps, if you count our interns, is a dozen or less. And this winter, we had just been recruiting new volunteers for this to start in April when we reopened for tours. And just at that point when we were about to schedule the training for them, we shut down. So we have probably sort of our active pool right now are a mix of new people and returning people. So one of the things we did immediately was try to schedule some virtual trainings and separate them out, and did some learning circles, like emailed out some readings and had them do them together, and doing some sharing in that way. We had what was going to be an in-person exhibit turned to a digital exhibit. We did some online learning about that. I periodically send them some articles or little bits of interest. We've encouraged them. We've really reminded them that you are still our ambassadors. We still consider you our volunteers, even though you're not coming into the museum. And so some of them have really taken that on, been really dutiful social media respondents, active, helping engage in that way. A couple have been interested in a digital project that we're interested in, but we're now kind of at that point as we shift into summer, trying to figure out what's next. One of our senior volunteers, who's our longest term volunteer, has really said, I want to come back and give tours, but we don't want him in the house, but we're thinking about doing some outdoor tours, and we're thinking, well, we might feel comfortable allowing him the opportunity to do that once staff has prototyped it. So regardless of whether we let our volunteers come back this year at all, we're still going to keep engaging them. Sometimes it's one-on-one. Like if somebody hasn't responded to one of my, because it's a small corps, if someone doesn't respond to some of those emails, I'll shoot out a little check-in, like, how you doing? I've been thinking about you, and that kind of relationship building, because we have realized that there is much of our constituents as our audiences. So just, it's a little free form, but wanting to make sure we still have them, that we treat them well, and that they still feel part of the the family in here, but we, at this point, don't expect to invite our volunteer corps back to serve in the house this year. So that's kind of where we're at with our corps. Which kind of brings us to the next question, next poll, which is about when are you planning to bring folks back? And it's ready to go. So yeah, we sort of heard where the Whaling Museum and Lippitt House are at. We're curious to see if you're not even going to bring them back in 2020, or if you're going to, if anybody, you know, this is fascinating watching the numbers go up. So it looks like there are a number of you are looking to bring back this summer, or, you know, a few bring back this summer. And yep, some of you have no idea. I think it's a good place to be. I mean, in this crazy world, everything's changing. So it looks like maybe everybody's responded. So we've got 6 of you are planning to come back this summer. 5 are for drafting a plan for the fall. 9 not even coming back this year. Nope. Oh, some people are already open. Ooh, the brave. And some of you have no idea. So I think, you know, what Brittany and I were thinking is we'd love to hear from the people who are already open or are planning to have them come back soon. Like, what have you figured out? Like, you've heard what Brittany and I have figured out so far, but what have you figured out? And this is where it becomes the town hall. Open it up. Raise your hand or unmute yourself, or
We actually do have a comment in the chat feature. More of a comment on the poll is basically they're an all-volunteer organization. Yeah, so Lori, I don't know if you want to explain more about it, because you know, the all-volunteers, definitely we do have quite a few of those here in New England and stuff like that. So that's the other thing to keep in mind too.
Sure, I can. We are an organization that is doing a reconstruction of a ship that was built in Maine in 1607 by English colonists. The colony didn't last very long, but the ship continued for quite a while after that. Because the guys were we were supposed to launch this year, and everyone was so interested in coming back for the construction that we did bring back those volunteers. We have a limit. The people that feel uncomfortable don't come. We sent out guidelines early. You know, you have to wear a mask if you're inside. We've tried to open up the boat shed so that there's not a lot of inside space. A lot of activities happen in the boat yard now. But, you know, now it's, now we want to open the visitor center, because, you know, that's how we get our money, is donations that people come to visit. That's a little bit more complicated. I know today they are spending time, a few of the volunteers are spending time looking at how the flow will work through the building, because we have a building and then the boat yard and then the boat shed. So it's just a matter of setting something up, asking the volunteers if they feel comfortable, then they'll come. If they don't, they won't. And we'll just deal with who we have.
Yeah, and Lori, that seems to reflect some of what's in the comments too. Like, we're bringing people back for special projects. We're only bringing back people who are comfortable, which almost makes me want to jump, Brittany, to what we were going to wrap up with as our question is, if you've got all these volunteers who aren't coming in, how are you keeping them engaged and on deck, so that when you are ready to bring back, they're they're still part of your core. Is that an issue for people that you feel like you're losing your core?
Can I throw something in there?
Yeah.
We've been having construction volunteers do things that they can at home. So, you know, somebody's been doing oars and somebody's been doing rigging at home. And some of the docents have been working on digital projects so that we have something to go on to our website. So anybody who's interested in continuing in that way, we have projects for them to do at home.
Great. And I see Lynn says, we're keeping volunteers engaged with weekly updates, volunteer training, and have asked a few to make masks for staff for reopening. That's a nice, yeah.
Should remind everybody that you guys can unmute yourselves and talk too.
Yeah. I get boring. It gets boring if you just hear me talk all the time. We do Zoom happy hours, radio plays, teas, depending on everyone's choice. Oh, can I come? Those sound really fun. Yeah.
I will actually, oh, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I will add to, actually, we do a little bit something similar to the Zoom happy hour, and I found that the volunteers love that, especially since there's like different groups on different days, and often like if you want to facilitate and set that up for them in case they're not sure how to set up Zoom, and then kind of let them take over. I know the Tuesday group for the last 3 months straight has met every single Tuesday and has their morning book club conversations every week.
Yeah. Cool. And then Stages of Freedom using volunteers virtually, doing online research, promotion, and fundraising. That's great. And then we've got 2 questions that are here sort of saying, we have volunteers who want to come back, but we don't want them back. And how do we, so what have you figured out? What's the language you're using? Are you able to appease? That doesn't sound like a nice word, but are you able to sort of say, not this, but you know, we've got this other way to be engaged? What's worked, what's not?
Hi, can I go?
Was that Kajette?
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Cathy.
Can you speak up a little? Hi, Kajette. Neighbor, another Providence neighbor.
I know, and I know Brittany too. Hi. Yeah, so we've decided to definitely not have our docents come back in the fall, and we'll see how 2021 will go. We basically worded it by saying that because we are not having K through 12 groups, we know that schools will not have field trips and that we won't be open for group visits in general. It's like you won't be needed in person. However, we've, like others, have been having Zoom sessions, and typically we don't have training classes in the summer months. We've decided to do enrichment classes over Zoom, and they're every other week. And then we've been considering like a reading group for the fall, and possibly just continuing like having curators talk, because we'll still have shows up. So we'll probably just do virtual classes, maybe even every other week as well in the fall. But we've been able to say to them that we don't want you back in person, not as harshly, but, you know, prioritizing that your safety is important. We won't have group visits, therefore you won't be needed in person. However, we'll still have engagements and stuff through Zoom.
And how have they responded?
Positively. I mean, no one has been upset about it, thank God. And they've been quite engaged. I started a Google group for them, to like a listserv on their, we have a website for them. So they've been really engaged, and also recommending, if any of your docents and volunteers as well, the National Docent Symposium Facebook group has been really engaging, and lots to do and lots of ideas. And I think the Smithsonian has a transcription project that we mentioned to them if they want to do that. And then we have may have them work on some image descriptions for our website to make it more accessible. I think we may have them do that, but the registrars are still really busy with other things, so they haven't given any guidelines on that just yet.
Kajette, would you be willing to type those 2 national resources into the chat for folks?
Sure.
Thanks. And Linda, did you have your hand up?
Yes, hi everyone. It's Linda Apple from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I just want to build on what Kajette was saying and some of my colleagues are on this call as well, and if they want to chime in. We're doing similarly. We are not having our public-facing volunteers come back until 2021, and all of our guide groups are going to be going through enrichment and training starting this summer, and we've put together a whole suite of things that they can do virtually. But we do have the problem of people really, really want to come back. And so I don't think the staff is ready for that. We don't even have an opening date yet. So we don't know when, and most of the staff will not be working in the museum. We'll still be working remotely. So we're trying to gently say, unfortunately, you can't come back in person. We've got all these wonderful enrichment and training opportunities for you for when we do reopen, and that should keep folks busy. But I think it was Alex who said we have people chomping at the bit to actually come in person, and we have a very large volunteer corps. So we're trying to keep everybody busy and happy, but it remains to be seen how successful that will be.
I think it's hard. I think people are stir crazy. Like I had one person being like, I will volunteer for you if I could come to your site because I need something to do. And I was like, nope, they want to get out. So it's hard. I mean, like human need.
Right.
But we've got these real challenges. Yeah.
And much like what Kajette was saying with school groups coming back, we're not sure. My colleagues have put together some great virtual opportunities for volunteers to do outreach with teachers and different tours online for school populations, but we don't know what the demand will be because, as you all know, like we don't know what the school year is going to look like and what teachers will be capable of, and so there's definitely an offer there for schools, but it really depends on how the schools react to that.
Actually,
Yes.
Just like to branch off, I have a question. Has anyone here gotten a chance to test that out when you're closed, but had a chance to do a virtual tour with any groups or anything like that? I see. Have any suggestions on how that may have went? I would love to hear, especially whether it was a staff or a volunteer who may have been the leader in that.
Hi, so I'm Ronnie Incham. I'm actually furloughed from the Museum of Fine Arts right now. I'm normally the accessibility coordinator, and in the 6 weeks that I worked prior to furlough, but while the museum was closed, we had volunteers and also the partnerships that we bring in through the accessibility program wanted to have something to do. So we did start up some Zoom programming, which I understand is still continuing, for partnerships that we already had coming into the museum. So those are interactive tours online, but with groups that we did know already. So I personally did a tour for people with memory loss and their care partners online, and it was people, from what I understand, it's all been really, people are thrilled. I mean, they've got something, the volunteers who want to do it, something to do, and also for the partnerships as well, who want to keep the connection.
I did. This is Lane Sparkman. I work at the Rhode Island State House, and we have virtually no volunteers, but we give a lot of tours, and we work in partnership with Rhode Island College usually. So they stopped coming to the State House pretty quickly, pretty early on in the pandemic, and every school tour was canceled. But usually between the months of April and June, we have about 5,000 kids come through the State House. It's just the busiest time of year. So we created a little virtual tour, as simple as can be, which was basically me walking classrooms through a Flickr album of the State House and narrating the tour that way. And it was really popular as far as I can tell. And from the surveys we did, the teachers were thrilled. The kids, for the most part, seemed to like it. We did really small groups. We did groups of up to 80 or so kids for some of them, which is not what I would recommend, but you can do that. And I think I'm expecting the appetite for that to be really big for all of next year. And particularly I was thinking about if and when districts have to, periodically close down because there's a little flare up in their area, maybe that's a time when teachers will turn to virtual field trips and things like that as a, oh my gosh, what are we going to do tomorrow moment. And so I feel like, that'll be useful. And then we did just 2 more things. We did a survey of the teachers after they did the field trip, just to find out how they felt about it, and asked also about other experiences that they would like. And virtual history presentations got a big thumbs up from all, 80% of the teachers that we queried. And these were kids ranging from 3rd grade to 10th grade, but with the bulk of them in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and actually have healthy smattering of 8th graders. And I loved what someone was suggesting in the chat about, institutions offering virtual tours to docents of other institutions, because it's a great way for everybody to practice, for everybody to see like what's another institution doing. And it's a way for that group to experience something together, which I think is really great. I mean, we don't have enough docents to bring them someplace else, but if we did, I think that would be really fun.
Hi, Amanda, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to add to anything?
Sure, I'll just pop in quickly about the school group stuff. We piloted virtual online school group visits in a couple of different models this spring. When I say we, I mean, I guess it's the royal we, because it's me. And I am already working with those pilot structures to use some of my volunteers and some of my 65 plus part-time staff members who usually work with schools in the fall. So I'm getting them trained this summer to be able to launch that. So I'm happy to talk offline with anyone who wants to know more about that.
I think we had Elisa was ready to talk, and then Dottie also raised her hand. So Lisa, if you want to go for it.
Sure. We've piloted back in spring break time frame a spring break camp, and we're currently running our summer camps as virtual summer camps. So we're doing groups of about 18 students at a time, and we send them a kit of information in advance. And the greatest thing we did was a fishing camp with young kids, 2nd to 4th grade, and we got a photograph back from New York City of a student who had gone into Central Park and caught a fish based on our information teaching them. So, but we've got, amazingly, we've got students coming from all over, including in Ontario, Canada, for joining this camp. So it's interesting that it's providing us a new reach into new audiences at the same time as bringing back campers who've been with us for many years in a row.
And are your volunteers involved in that, or are you an all-volunteer organization?
Neither one. We have some volunteers, some AmeriCorps, who are involved in that. So they're borderline volunteers. They certainly don't get paid like regular staff, and they're part of the big program. But they're helping us build it. Unfortunately, most of our volunteers are not able to come back because there have been so many travel restrictions until just recently. So we have a few choice volunteers who have been able to take projects home to work on, and a few who are coming and working on boat building on campus where they can work outside in the fresh air.
We also have a lot of outside reach too now out of New England, as some of you guys know that are on the call. Dottie, did you have any? Unmute yourself first, though. All right, Dottie, let me unmute you. There we go. Cute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
Finally, I haven't been able to hear you either. Fun. Dottie Collins from the Art Complex Museum in Duxbury. We have 48 volunteers in various ages, naturally, excitingly, from teenagers up to 90. They are not going to be coming back until June of 2021. We are engaging them by individual phone calls, a weekly newsletter, and we are celebrating our 50th anniversary in 2021. So we're remotely working on plans for celebrating our 50th, and most of the volunteers are very active in participating in doing historical research and research about some of our exhibits and such. So we are keeping in touch with everybody. They're very anxious to come back, but they want to come back when it's right for them and safe for them, and when it's also safe for the artists and for the visitors that we have. So right now, I think we have very contented volunteers who are holding up quite well. We miss them, they miss us, but most everybody is not going to miss out on 50th anniversary, so they've all said they will come back.
Nice. I've noticed that several comments have come in about non-tech savvy volunteers, particularly seniors, and I thought I'd actually, Brittany, because Brittany, I know that was a challenge you had, if you want to kick that conversation off.
Sure. So with 120 volunteers, we actually have callers of the day. Before COVID happened, they often were the ones who would be the volunteers to schedule the other volunteers for the school programmings or whatever events may be that day. So when COVID first originally happened, I reached out to the callers of the day and asked them to help me identify which volunteers are most either limited to the actual technology to have Zoom or, email or things like that, and which volunteers just aren't comfortable in general with it. So we kind of were able to identify who is kind of like a buddy phone call system, where if we're having a Zoom meeting and we know specifically 5 or 6 volunteers who are not going to attend, I have those callers a day and I will go and reach out to them and say, hey, here's the most up-to-date information. That's where we've kind of been able to fill in some of the gaps. I have noticed a couple of them saying, oh, I really want to make a video. I really want to do this to, find something to do and contribute. But I remember one of them made a video but wasn't able to upload it, and it became very frustrating for them to figure that out. So I think that is something kind of like a learning curve of just walking them through and talking them through. I've had a few phone calls with them for sometimes a couple hours where we're talking of like, oh, here's how to upload it. Here's how you can do this. It usually goes really well for the most part. And I think they've been very patient with learning the new information as well. And I think that's another thing too is one way volunteers, we've asked them to contribute is by reaching out to other volunteers. I know the call is today, but we've reached out to all volunteers saying, hey, a service you can do right now is, almost like be a friend to your fellow volunteer and have phone calls, check in with them weekly, since it is such a big core group. So that's kind of one way we've tried to fill in that tech gap as much as we can. Has anyone had any issues with that or any progress with the tech issue with their volunteer corps?
Or alternative ways of engaging?
This is Lori Mashandaro at Rosen Cottage in Connecticut. I've talked, I don't know how many people through how to use Zoom. And we also use a software or a platform at Historic New England called Blue Jeans, which doesn't require any download or anything. You just click on the link and you're there. So that's very helpful with a lot of people that, because we have the same problem. A lot of people just aren't that tech savvy. But talking them through it, people feel empowered, they can do it, they're ready to go on the next step once they learn how to do it. Now they're experts on Zoom.
Yeah, hi, my name's Abby. I'm from the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate in Boston. Wow, I haven't said that full sentence since I answered a phone in March. So we have my job, I'm the visitor experience coordinator. I'm in charge of the volunteers and interns with my colleague. And we've been doing the Zoom sessions like everybody else. We've also, we have about a mix between tech savvy and then tech petrified. So we've done the idiot proof guide of emails, like how we can do this. We've talked many people through, like Lori said, it's a real good team building thing. They feel empowered. They can do it with their grandkids. We've also had a lot of luck with a newsletter. So what we do is we have them send in pictures of their grandkids if they're social distancing, or articles. One of our volunteers is in her 60s and very proud of it. Her mother is 101. So she talks about what it was like living through the Spanish flu and these articles. And it was also a way when we did have our interns in the spring who had a very interesting internship this past season. They got to read their papers, and we usually do all-day presentations with the kids. So the volunteers get to come in, praise the kids, they get to learn something, the kids get something from it. In this case, they got to read them separately, but it's a great way for them to engage. We've also been really encouraging them, if they can't figure out Zoom, call by phone. And we do have some very vain, and they're very self-admitted vain, volunteers that don't want to be seen on camera. As you see, mine is not on right now. Because I still have another staff meeting at 2:00. But this is our way of doing it. They call in by phone, they can be wherever, they don't have to be at a computer, and it's really keeping them together. We are one of the sites that is not encouraging them to come back. We are in the same boat like all other Massachusetts museums of we don't know what the Freedom Trail is going on with schools, what there will be. We're exploring avenues of virtual tours, things like that. But at this point, bringing the volunteers is not one of our priorities, just for our own sanity, because my colleague and I will probably have a nervous breakdown worrying about them.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a couple questions or a little conversation I noticed in the chat going on about for people who are coming back, mandatory training, like how are you, and some of you talked about having checklists. Here's the rules you have to follow when you come back, but what are you figuring out about that safe, the new safety training and protocol and the new roles? Like Brittany talked about, they're gonna have very different jobs at the Whaling Museum, which will be really hard for some of them because they're gonna wanna revert back into their old engagement role where we, they really need them to play a different role. So talk to us about that.
Hi, it's Linda again. We are going to have mandatory training, everything from safety and security to anti-racist training to teaching inclusive practice tips to what we call a fine art of service, which is our customer service training program. They're going to have to redo that because it's going to be very different. So those will all be mandatory and required of everyone, regardless of if you've gone through this before. So they will have to, we'll have to sign off on these trainings before they can actually either give tours or come back into the building in person. So that's how we are. It's going to be challenging to handle all that because we do have a lot of volunteers, but we really feel like this is, some people will self-select out. We know they will. And others will be very excited to do all this training. And it's going to be a good way to make sure that everyone has consistent information and is delivering the quality service. And so that's how we're doing it.
Yeah, I'll pop in there. Like Linda, I'm Amanda Goodhart Park's New England Air Museum in Connecticut, one of the few canaries in the coal mine that have reopened fully. And it's been great for us. We've had a really great experience reopening, so I hope that is the case for all of you as well. For our volunteers specifically, I kind of laid this all out in the chat, but we also are doing mandatory training. That training takes place on Zoom over 1 or 2 sessions, depending on how much time the volunteer wants to commit to that training, so we can break it up for them. They also get our new operations plan and our COVID-19 specific operations plan, which is extensive. Our state museum sector reopening guidelines, there's a standardized list of all these documents that we review with them ahead of time, and they get copies of ahead of time. And then when they walk in the first day, the first thing they do is hand over a sign saying that they not only received but understand all those policies, and it's all kind of listed out. So it's like a mortgage. You have to like initial each line. We found that was helpful because it's just a reminder that of each one of these policies, everything from face coverings to We're now restricting access of certain parts of our museum to volunteers where they used to have free reign of a lot of our spaces. Now they no longer do. So there's been a lot of policy stuff. We've also been bringing our volunteers back by role. So as an aviation museum, we have an aircraft restoration team, and they were the ones who were most interested in coming back immediately. So our restoration coordinator has some specific training for them too about utilizing shared equipment and, you know, things like that. But it's been largely successful. When we reopened as an outdoor only museum on May 23rd, we had a very small group of 100, our volunteer corps is about 150. We had about 15 that said they were ready to go opening weekend. Now that number, we're probably at 35–40% are back, and we get more and more back each week. So they're talking to each other about what we're doing and what's happening at the museum. And I think the word has gone back to them that we have reopened in a way that makes them safe and our visitors safe. And so again, more of them are coming back each week.
Thank you for being our canary. Dottie? Heather, yeah, Heather's gonna unmute you, I think.
No, that's not working.
Sorry.
There you go.
Staying there. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
We are going to have a pre-opening training. As I said, we're not opening until June of 2021. And so we're talking about Zooming, we're talking about letters to the volunteers. Most of them would prefer coming to the museum in small groups of 10 or less, and walking through, you know, sanitization procedures, the safety procedures, security, anti-racist inclusive practices for volunteers. They're all very anxious that they want to be doing the right thing and being at the right place and at the right time, but they want to have some security feeling that they're getting some advice and following some guidelines from the museum. So that is being worked on. We have not decided on how best to reach everybody. And I agree, I was very interested. Someone say an easy clicking on link, is it Blue Jeans? Did someone mention?
Whoever did that, could you put that in the chat for everybody?
Because that sounds like it would be interesting, because so many of my volunteers have trouble with Zoom or have trouble with, you know, getting virtually involved with us online. So thank you for that kind of information.
Lori also left a link too, so for Zoom meeting basics and stuff. So
yeah, and if you don't know, you can go to the chat and click on file and download the entire chat at the end of the meeting so that you have all those notes. They're a little awkward to read, but it's a great way to compile the links on some interesting conversations. Another thread that I'm noticing going through the chat is staff. The staff who don't, you know, how do you bring staff on board that it's worth spending the time to invest in the volunteers? And I think also, you know, are any of you, like, your roles changing, you know, that maybe you worked with volunteers in one way, but now you have a different job, or you didn't, or you have staff who didn't work with volunteers and now have to, like, so let's talk about the staff side about that for a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Marty. I'm from the Ecotarium. I am the collections management specialist and head of the collections management department, which formally is me. All of my work has been done by volunteers. They've been conducting an inventory. So we have experts identify specimens, and then volunteers take photos, they write down the information, they enter the data. They do the vast bulk of the work of our inventory, which is really what I was hired to do. And now that we don't have any volunteers, I'm kind of stalled out on what it is that I should be doing. I've made up some digital projects that I've got my interns working on that I'm hoping we can use to engage volunteers. But yeah, I'm worried about the upstream pipeline of my job.
Others want to talk about how you're engaging staff or the challenges you're having engaging staff to engage with volunteers?
I know this also came up during the remote internship yesterday too, is getting the staff on board. I know Marty talked about that too.
Alyssa had a hand up, I think.
Yeah, last week I did a presentation at our staff meeting, trying to explain that, you know, volunteers want to come back, they want to help out where they can, and to try and get staff to come up with ideas of where they could be involved safely. We have a few, like I said, that are coming back to work in the boat shop, and that one department seems to be embracing the volunteers, but very few others have even responded to the request. Most of them kind of nodded at best, and it's been radio silence ever since. So, and that was at my presentation was at the request of the executive director. So
okay.
It is coming from the top, but nobody else seems to be interested. And it's a long-term fight. I've been doing this job for almost 20 years, and trying to get other staff members to say, you know, training this person is a really worthwhile thing, and they can continue to help us year after year once they're trained. But they see that time block of, oh, I have to spend 5 hours training somebody. But yeah, but then they're going to give you 100 hours or 200 hours a year. I just haven't gotten my way past that roadblock too often.
So it's not a new problem for your institution. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the issues is a lot of us are just overwhelmed. There's so many things that we're trying to handle, and then to handle the many. I mean, the wonderful thing about volunteers is they're people, and that's the challenge. You know, that's also the terrible part about them is they're people. You know, like they all have their individual needs.
I'll pop in on that. Amanda from the New England Air Museum again. We are a full-time staff of 6, and we lost one of the 6 during most of our closure due to military service. National Guard got called up. So for us, you know, and we have a small part-time corps that was furloughed during the closure. Again, we've been able to bring most of them back. But for us, getting our volunteers back and trained and comfortable and safe was a priority. We just can't function well without them. And so for us, it was an institutional priority of our very small and nimble team. So hopefully, you know, Elisa, that you can kind of try to change the culture shift at your institution that way and try to frame the value of a volunteer. Just like with training a staff member, the onboarding, the more time you put into someone on the onboard, the better off their experience and your experience with them is going to be. So if I can help in that way, feel free to contact me offline.
I'm noticing we have about 10 minutes left. Brittany and I prepared some fill-in questions in case things didn't come up, but I'm just going to give this opportunity of like what hasn't been talked about here that you were really hoping, you know, anybody got anything, throw it in the chat or speak up, or else we have some good conversation starters.
I have a question. How do you handle, or I'm anticipating, and it has started, some volunteers who aren't willing to follow the guidelines, and you address it, you know, because you have to address it. Is it something, are we willing to lose volunteers over this, or, you know, how are others approaching this?
I can answer in terms of for the New Bedford Whaling Museum. I know right now there's a couple of volunteers particularly who we can foresee just from past behavior may have a similar situation. So right off the bat, that's kind of one of the reasons why we're like, the only available volunteer role right now is different than what you're used to. And then in order to do it, you have to follow these set instructions and trainings. And actually our first official one is tomorrow that we'll be running, that they have to sit through that virtual training and then do online presentation and watch online presentations. And then before each of their shifts, they have to do a mandatory at-home virtual screening. It's through SurveyMonkey that we use it from, that asks, like, have you been in groups? Are you wearing masks? Are you been exposed by any chance? So I think that's a way of keeping them, what's what I'm looking for, kind of, trying to find the word, responsible with what their role is here, and that if there is a couple of them that they're not following those strict guidelines, we're going to say, we're sorry, but until the museum is back to its new normal, when you can do your role, we're going to have to ask you can't be in this role right now. I think it's going to be some hard conversations that will come up, but I think that's going to be the responsibility on both as a staff and on their end, that they're going to have to meet us like halfway as well. But I feel your fear, though. I have similar fear for some of that as well.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I'm kind of hearing from you that approach of, like, be the hard ass teacher going in and then let up later, rather than being everybody's friend in the beginning and then having things go out of chaos. So yeah, you're really laying down the law really tight about what's acceptable. Others?
The museum where I work has some experience with this, even though we haven't reopened yet, because it's a museum that's part of a hospital. And just a couple of years ago, the hospital instituted a mandatory flu shot policy, which as a major hospital was a little late in doing so compared with others. So we've gone through we have this public health related policy that is somewhat politically charged, maybe not quite as politically charged as the current environment, but people have different opinions about whether they should vaccinate themselves to protect themselves and others. And we did see a little bit of pushback. People who choose to volunteer at a museum that's at a hospital largely are people who self-select towards being in favor of things like vaccines. But we did get some people who weren't comfortable with the mandate. We were very firm on it. It was definitely not optional. It wasn't something to negotiate, but what we did was, it was never, if you can't comply, you're out. It's you're out until you can comply. So once, if people came around, they were welcomed back, and they were never, off the volunteer rolls. They were just functionally furloughed as volunteers. And we did have to do that with a couple of people, one who was resisting and not telling us why, and one who was having a hard time getting her paperwork transferred because she had gotten her flu shot somewhere that wasn't terribly compatible with communicating that information to another institution. So it just meant that they were out for a little while.
Yeah, I like that concept of, was it functionally furloughed, you said? That was a nice term, yeah. But that they're, yeah, you're not cutting them from your core, but until there's another opportunity as well.
A couple people mentioned, what is this? Trainings, mandatory trainings before folks can come back, and a couple have mentioned anti-racist trainings. And I'm just curious what that might entail for those. I mean, you don't have to say it if you don't want, but maybe put it in a chat. I was just curious because I haven't been thinking about that at all because we've been doing that, but policies with whatever the new things we have to do in our state, we'd have to train docents on once they are physically returning, but I'm curious about the anti-racist part.
This is Nicole Claris from the MFA, and I'm happy to talk about what we've done in the past and some of this is still taking shape. So we had We the People, which is a group of anti-racist educators based in Boston, train our most recent class of gallery instructors who do our K through 12 tours. And they did 3 sessions for us out of a 16-week initial training. So it was just that commitment of time. And I'm happy to talk to you about what that training really was. What we're looking at for volunteers across the museum is 3 sessions with a former educator. That also includes, Linda, through her office, ran unconscious bias training last year. This would be more explicit and get into also how do you talk to folks, like when someone says something, whether it's a visitor, whether it's a colleague, or you yourself have been called out. There's that. And we're also working on training towards the end of the month. Again, I'm happy to talk offline, for a group of volunteers who's working on a writing project. They're redoing a massive guide to the collection that was used for teaching. And we really want them to have an explicit anti-racist lens. And so we're working with a teacher from Arlington who teaches the history of racism there, who we've worked with before, and someone who used to be at Facing History. And my husband is calling the dog right now. So it's just like perfect timing. What does it mean for, like, what does it mean? Because there's people in that conversation who that term is new for. What does it mean when you're researching through an anti-racist lens? And then what does it mean to write that way explicitly? So we're developing this Thursday and hoping to get it done in a month. But that's kind of what we're starting to do. So there will be kind of degrees in terms of what people's roles are, in terms of their participation in that conversation. But the big change is that this used to be in pockets across the museum, and now it's for everyone. If you have a badge on, this is part of your training. So, but really, I also just love what you guys are doing at RISD, so I would love to talk more.
Oh, we're doing a lot in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Your galleries are incredible right now, if I can just fangirl for a second. So,
I appreciate that. I'm a fan. I work there. Yeah. I mean, we're actually going to publish some stuff soon, so I will share it. It'll be on the NEMA publication side, so about some internal stuff that we've been doing the past 3 years. So, yeah, it's just like, oh, anti-racist, because that's what I do. But yeah, it'll be shared once NEMA publishes it. It'll probably be in July.
That's great.
Yep, the next issue is coming out in mid-July.
Yeah. Excited.
Any last burning question or last couple of minutes? Any last comments, Brittany, from you, or last question you want to put out?
Not that I can, I think we were able to get through all of our questions and then some. And thank you all for the feedback too. I think it's also really helpful for us as we're, going through our places as well. So it's really great to hear all the different feedback.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been watching the chat, so I encourage everybody to download it because there are some good resources. And if you have anybody last minute want to throw in any other resources to share, please do. And watch for NEMA, the newsletter coming out in the summer with some of these resources, and stay in touch with each other because we're all just going to learn from each other. Yeah. Yeah. And go volunteers. Yay, volunteers.
Yay. Speaking of volunteers, thank you, Cathy and Brittany.
Thank you for all contributing to such a lively conversation. Really appreciate not having dead air.
It's always good. I do want to thank Cathy and Brittany for helping us out, lead this conversation on volunteers. If you guys ever have any topic that you would like to discuss in a town hall, we do take volunteers. We also take suggestions on topics, and we usually go and search someone out to actually lead that conversation. If you have missed an earlier webinar or a town hall, make sure to check out the NEMA website. There's a link to our YouTube channel that has all the recordings. We have some great resources there. If you need to spend some time there, that's great. And then definitely check out our calendar of events. We do have quite a few webinars and town halls coming up. The one next week will be on frontline staff and de-escalation, which is going to be a big one. So we're looking forward to that one. And I want to say thank you guys all for joining us on July 1st, a new month. And we will see you at another town hall. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.